Hi, as a Christmas present to myself, I wanted to go back to the traditional route of how I used to make these videos, which is looking at arguments against things that I believe in. In this case, it's going to be moral relativism. I really prefer these types of videos because I find that my thinking is better if I'm responding to an argument. It doesn't allow me to escape away into my thoughts. So today I'm going to be looking at the 7 fatal flaws of moral relativism. This is from monergism.com, which is actually a Christian theological doctrine that states Jesus Christ is the Holy Savior, of course, and all that stuff. And I want to quickly say the reason that a lot of the arguments against moral relativity will come from Christian sites is because a lot of people conflate the ideas of there not being an ultimate divine being with there not being an ultimate divine moral scale that humans are meant to follow. And the opposite is true, where if you do believe in a divine being, many people will assume that means that those rules are set in stone from that divine being of the morals that you should follow. I just want to point out that relevancy, which is why you'll find a lot of theists arguing against atheists on this matter. But we can get into the supposed flaw one here. Moral relativists can't accuse others of wrongdoing. Relativism makes it impossible to criticize the behavior of others because relativism ultimately denies such a thing a wrongdoing. If one believes that morality is a matter of personal definition, then you surrender the possibility of making objective moral judgments against the action of others, no matter how offensive they are to your intuitive sense of right or wrong. This means that a relativist cannot rationally object to murder, child abuse, racism, sexism, or environmental destruction if those actions are consistent with the perpetrator's personal moral understanding of what is right and good. Okay, I want to first say this doesn't make a lot of sense because I think it's confusing the idea of moral relativism with solipsism. I can still accuse people of wrongdoings even if there's no objective moral truth to follow, because that does not mean that I don't have intuitive personal beliefs on what is moral. That's the idea of moral relativity. It varies from person to person. I personally think the actions described before are wrong. Therefore, I can criticize because of that. It doesn't have to be objectively evil to say it's wrong. I think that a lot of moral relativists still have a baseline of what is best for humanity or best for a demographic of people. And if an idea were to violate those principles, that can be seen as wrong. It does not mean that there is a moral wrong etched somewhere into the universe. It just means that in that moment, to those people, you are doing them negatively. Therefore, you're in the wrong. If you want to look at it on an even more objective scale, look at societal stability. What actions are best to maintain society as we know it in a positive light? There doesn't have to be objective truth, it just has to be what we can observe to affect positively or negatively on our surroundings in terms of human advancement. You might see the argument in this case that the person doing these terrible actions believes it is right, and because you believe that everyone has their own internal rules, you cannot tell them they are in the wrong for that. But that doesn't apply at all, because what they're doing affects the people around them. If you're violating someone else's personal autonomy, you are violating the idea of the rights given to that person. Especially if we can even just look at laws in our world today. Just because we make a law doesn't make it a universal objective truth. It just means that we have to follow that to best carry out society most of the time. If someone's actions violate the law, they don't have to be violating an objective truth in the universe to be wrong. I'll get on to flaw 2 now. Relativists can't complain about the problem of evil. The reality of evil in the world is one of the first objections raised against the existence of God. This entire objection hinges on the observation that true evil exists. Objective evil cannot exist if moral values are relative to the observer. I feel like I could probably pretty quickly explain what I believe on this one in a way that makes sense. For there to be evil in the world, we don't have to tie it to a cosmic or divine sense of this evil caricature. We can just tie it down to the negative personal experiences caused by an action. If we all hold innate desire to develop more as human beings and to help the autonomy of ourselves and the people around us, we can look at actions or events that hinder those desires and say that is bad or that is evil without needing a divine being there. To go back to something said in the flaw 2 here, it says objectionists will often raise question on why a god would allow evil things to happen, but there can't be evil things without a god. That's not true at all, because we just need to look at what is bad for our advancements as a humankind. Flaw 3 is relativists can't place blame or accept praise. Relativism renders the concepts of praise and blame meaningless because no external standard of measurement defines what should be applauded or condemned. Without absolute, nothing is ultimately bad, deplorable, tragic, or worthy of blame. Again, with the idea of a shared value for human advancement, this makes complete sense to be able to place blame or say something is unfair or unjust without needing an objective moral truth. If we have shared values that humanity should advance and hardships should be minimized, then we can look at what causes that and say that is unfair, what you were doing is unfair, or that is unjust. I think a lot of the times a problem that's run into here is theists often see everything that is judged through an external factor, like a divine being is the only one worthy of judging these things, that isn't true at all. Look at people that aren't subscribed to religions. They can still believe that something is bad or good because they can see from their own experiences what helps them advance or others advance without needing to fall back on a divine being. Blaming someone based on your own morals is only holding them to their own standards. The standards that they set to themselves. If I were to litter and you were to say that wasn't good, you need to clean up after yourself, you'd be holding me to the standards that I set that littering is bad. Probably a shared value that we both have. There's actually an interesting point to be brought up here with not being able to objectively say something is good or bad or praise or blame something. And it's that if there is an objective moral truth or moral hindrance in the universe set by a divine being, then isn't everything we do just God's design for these things? Where's the personal choice that's promised to us that also allows us to be condemned by the theists? By saying there is an objective universal truth, you're taking away one more piece of free will from humanity. Flaw 4, relativists can't make charges of unfairness or injustice. Under relativism, the notion of fairness and justice are incoherent, as both concepts dictate that people should receive equal treatment based on some agreed external standard. However, relativism does away with any notion of external binding standards. Justice entails punishing those who are guilty of a misdemeanor, but under relativism, guilt and blame do not exist. Okay, this is ridiculous. In the same way that we can make our own personal standards to hold ourselves and others accountable, we can come together to make laws that people can violate objectively, right? If there is a nation trying to come together to decide what is best for the advancement of their future, they will make laws to hold the citizens of that nation in check. These are all factors brought together by humanity, no external factor. And if these ideas of what are best for keeping us in check are broken, then a citizen can be punished for that. There does not need to be a divine creature in between any of that system. There might not be an objective truth, but for like this example, we can't make charges of unfairness or injustice. There is a social contract you accept to be in by being a part of a nation. You have to be under those laws that were created by people coming together with their own personal beliefs and choosing what is best for the future of the nation. By violating that contract, you have to suffer the consequences. Flaw 5. Relativists can't improve their morality. Relativists can change their personal ethics, but they can never become better people. Under relativism, one's ethics can never become more moral. Ethics and morals can change, but they can never improve, as there is no objective standard to improve against. If, however, moral improvement seems to be a concept that makes sense, then relativism is false. I think this is a grave misunderstanding of relative morality. Sorry, it's 3 in the morning, because it seems to me like a moral relativist has more opportunities to improve as people morally. There not being a divine set in stone rule to follow by a divine creator means that we can adapt with the times that we are in for the betterment of humanity. Relativists aren't denying human moral advancement, they're enabling it, if anything. They are just doing so in a very human way, centered between humans, underneath the regular consensus of human ruling. I always find it so frustrating that a divine creator has to be the root decider of all of these things, when so clearly the rules we violate are only made by the consensus of humans without a divine creator. It almost seems like throwing a divine creator into the mix is a way of avoiding accountability for a flawed system. If we can accept that human beings can come together and still make a flawed system, that's good. It shows that we can use critical thinking to determine if something is moral or immoral, meaning better for human advancement. This is why systems not based on a cosmic universal truth for morality are better, because they can shift with the time and what's best for the citizens. Flaw 6. Relativists can't hold meaningful moral discussions. What's there to talk about? If morals are entirely relative and all views are equal, then no way of thinking is better than another. No moral position can be judged as adequate or deficient, unreasonable, acceptable, or even barbaric. If ethical disputes make sense only when morals are objective, then relativism can only be consistently lived out in silence. For this reason, it is rare to meet a rational and consistent relativist, as most are quick to impose their own moral rules, like it's wrong to push your own morality on others. Okay, that last part seems a bit like a dog whistle, I want to say, almost. I think with the points I've already provided in this video, it should be pretty easy to know my response here. We can judge if something is moral or immoral based on our own standards that we set or the society around us sets, if it's bad or good for human advancement, if it's hindering the autonomy of the people around us. There doesn't need to be a universal truth about that. There just needs to be what we have agreed as a society to be best for humanity. Flaw 7. Relativists can't promote the obligation of tolerance. The relativist's moral obligation to be tolerant is self-refuting. Ironically, the principle of tolerance is considered one of the key virtues of relativism. Morals are individual, so they say, and therefore we ought to tolerate the viewpoints of others and not pass judgment on their behavior and attitudes. The idea melting pot comes to mind. Having many different viewpoints come into a society are important because it gives us the most varied perspective on what's best for the advancement of humanity. If we want to advance humanity, it's important that we're tolerant because it'll give us more opportunity to make good decisions for that advancement. There is no point in relativism where we have to say, there's no rule to listen to you, so why would I? That's ridiculous. In fact, the way I see it, the exact opposite is true. There's no rule against you or for you, so I might as well get your perspective so that I can see if it's better for society. I have now been recording for 33 minutes. I estimate I'll cut out 24 of these minutes. How long is that? 9-minute video? It is so late. You can probably see my eyes slowly squinting more and more as I go throughout the video reading the text. I'm exhausted. My coffee link's in the description. I hope you enjoyed. Leave thoughts below. I have to get to bed. Merry Christmas and have a good day.